Thank you everyone for joining us for our November Sustainability Series. My name is Lauren Jensen, and I'm here today with Anthony Wittmer, who is the Communications Specialist from Olmsted County's Environmental Resources. He's been in this role since 2014, and in his time with the department has had the opportunity to talk trash with thousands of community members in a variety of settings. Today, he'll be presenting on Olmsted County's integrated solid waste management system, where we can learn about the unique services provided by Recycling Center Plus, the Hazardous Waste Facility, the Yard Compost Site, and the Waste to Energy Facility, as well as the Kalmar Landfill. Um, so, with that, I'll hand it off to Anthony. Feel free to put questions in the chat. We will answer them throughout today's presentation. We'll also save some time at the end for some questions and discussion as well. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us here today.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction, Lauren. Yeah, as Lauren said, I do like for this to be a fairly interactive presentation. I know it's a little bit different doing this over Zoom than it would be in person, but please don't hesitate to hop in with a question, because I think that makes it more fun for everybody, and it usually sparks additional questions. So with that, I am going to share my screen. Lauren, can you see that? Everyone can see that? Excellent. Okay, so in my slideshow mode, I can't really see what's going on in the Zoom. So Lauren, if there's anything, just let me know if there's a question. But
Will do.
Getting started, yeah. Olmsted County's integrated solid waste management system. There's a proper place for your waste in Olmsted County, right? And so today, being America Recycles Day, it provides a nice national platform to, maybe give some specific attention on, garbage and recycling, and as well as an opportunity to promote these other operations and services in our department. And a lot of times when I give this type of presentation to community groups, conversations just naturally drift into, hey, I've got this sitting in my garage right now, and I don't know what to do with it. So even if you have questions like that, feel free to put it in the chat or save it for the end. That's fine too. And starting it off, really the reason behind we have such a comprehensive solid waste system in Olmsted County has to do with the geology of Olmsted County and much of southeastern Minnesota. I will openly say that I think that Olmsted County has one of the most comprehensive, if not the most comprehensive, solid waste systems in the state. There's still opportunities to grow, but it is quite unique in the fact that we have a lot of our services all, so close to each other. But jumping back in here on this map, you can see this area in red. We have this prevalence of a karst geology, and karst is characterized by lots of fissures, cracks, sinkholes in the underlying bedrock, which makes our drinking water, our aquifers, relatively susceptible to pollutants at the surface. And so, as you can imagine, with that, siting a landfill is extremely challenging in our part of the world. And so much so that we really only have one decent spot out in Kalmar Township where we do have a landfill. And that, being one of the main driving forces on why we have this facility, we're going to go facility by facility. But a good framework for how we have our operations set up would be the solid waste hierarchy. And lots of people are familiar with the 3 R's, right? Reduce, reuse, recycle. They are ordered in that, or they're listed in that order because that is their order of preference. Recycling tends to get the lion's share of attention when talking about waste. But if we can reduce and reuse a material before we even have to worry about recycling it, that's even better. And, I'll go as far as to say that I think as a society, we are over-reliant on recycling to, sort of balance those scales, because I think a lot of us do just inherently feel bad about making waste. And I think recycling has an emotional component to it. And a lot of people think that maybe they're balancing the scales by recycling. And yes, recycling is great when it makes sense. But, even the process of recycling does take resources as well. And so there's really no substitute for waste reduction or reuse. But then going down after that recycling, we've got composting in the form of our yard waste compost site. We have our waste to energy facility, and then Kalmar Landfill. So all of these activities and operations are designed to send as little waste into the ground as possible. So that first R, waste reduction through education, doing these types of presentations is one of my favorite things to do. We wear a lot of different hats in the department, but getting out and actually speaking with members of the community or having them come tour through our facilities is always a ton of fun. Um, Specifically within the school district, we've had a very long-standing relationship with Corey Hill Nature Center. I mean, I think that goes back over 20 years of having their staff lead tour groups of every the curriculum within the Rochester Public School District kind of changes. So it's been every fifth grade class in the district, sixth grade. Now we're back to every fifth grade class in the Rochester School District comes and takes a tour through our waste energy facility, recycling center, hazardous waste facility, and they see the compost site. And I really like to say that going on these tours helps to make garbage real for a lot of people, because once people roll out their curbside carts, it's kind of out of sight and out of mind. And really seeing the pit filled up with 1,500 tons of garbage that has accumulated over the course of just, I don't know, 5 days, 3 to 5 days, depending on the season, it really adds some perspective on the amount of waste we are generating just in our little part of the world. Getting into the first facility we'll talk about, the hazardous waste facility, and with the potential to be especially harmful to people and the environment, we want to make sure we're providing that proper outlet for poisonous, flammable, corrosive materials, items that we don't want going in the recycling cart or your garbage bin. And we take a lot more items beyond this, but these are just some common items. So aerosols, paints, stains, varnishes, mercury products like CFL light bulbs, rechargeable batteries. I like to make some specific emphasis on those because they are such a huge problem for the waste and recycling industry as a whole. Lithium ion in particular are quite volatile when they become damaged. And so they start fires very commonly in the backs of garbage and recycling carts, or even at recycling centers, you name it, transfer stations. They're a big problem. So that's why we want to make sure we're getting those rechargeable batteries out of the waste stream and into the hazardous waste facility for processing. So really, any types of poisonous, flammable, corrosive materials we'd want going into the waste facility. If you have been down to our facility before, you may have noticed that there is a reuse center attached to the building. About 40% of the material brought into the hazardous waste facility still has life left in it. And we put that on the shelves in the reuse center for people to pick up. And, the stockpiles of different materials will kind of ebb and flow depending on where we are in the season. End of summer, it's pretty full. People are cleaning out their garages. Spring clean out is another busy time. And so you'll find anything from pesticides, lots of paints and stains, household cleaners, and really just a lot of random items that you could pick up at no charge. And just a special note, if you like neutral tones for paint, I tell you, this is the place, because we get so much paint and they come in half full at a time. We have to mix them together to make full containers. So a lot of times the colors just come out as tan. And so if you're not super particular on the shade of paint, it can be a big money saver. And we've had farmers come in that just want, hey, I need 20 gallons of paint, 30 gallons of paint just to cover the side of a building. And they're able to save quite a bit of money going that route. Next on our facility list would be the Olmsted County Recycling Center Plus. This is going to be a self-haul option for residents who don't have a curbside hauler. So maybe they don't, generate enough waste to justify the expense of a weekly garbage or recycling service. This is an alternative. And we take a lot of the same types of items that you would see in a curbside recycling cart. The plastics 1, 2s, and 5s, we do say with a neck. So that does kind of narrow it down a little bit. There's certain types of plastics that, we just aren't taking right now. But your pop bottles, milk jugs, detergent bottles, number 5 dairy containers, cottage cheese containers, yogurt tubs, margarine tubs, things like that. Then the aluminum cans, steel cans, a lot of that is going to be the same. Something that is different, we don't currently take paperboard, so cereal boxes, cracker boxes, in with our corrugated cardboard, because the paper mill that we send our corrugated cardboard to cannot process that in with their I guess recipe, so to speak. The little tiny plant fibers that comprise the paperboard boxes are shorter and weaker than the fibers you would find in a corrugated cardboard box, so like an Amazon box. And so those cereal boxes just don't have the same structural integrity as a big corrugated box. Now, we are currently in conversation actually with another end market that has mills throughout the Midwest that likely could take the paperboard item. So if there's anybody on this call who self hauls to the recycling center, keep an eye out for that in the next month or so as we continue to explore potential markets for that material. Going inside the facility, the Recycling Center Plus, again, is going to be that one-stop drop-off for everything from tires to TVs, carpet, computers, appliances, you name it. I mean, we try to really provide that one-stop shop, or one-stop drop, I should say, for a variety of different items. Now, there is going to be fees for pretty much every item that you bring inside the facility. That will vary depending on the that it is. I mean, if you have big loads of scrap metal, we can't take that at those green drop off bins on the outside. You'd come in and they point you to the correct bin behind the facility. But a lot of them are going to have a fee. If you're bringing standard garbage, earlier I mentioned that a lot of people who use this facility don't have curbside haulers. They try to keep that garbage as compact as possible because it is a volume based fee inside the facility. So essentially, the more you throw away, the more you're going to pay. And it is a rate of $5 per 30 gallons, or excuse me, $5, yeah, per 30 gallons of garbage, up to about a cubic yard, where we're charging about $30 for a cubic. Behind the facility, the staff will direct residents to one of, a number of bins, depending on the type of material. Burn just means we can process it at our waste energy facility. Non-burn would mean there's something about the material that can't go straight over to the pit at waste energy. So it kind of depends. And luckily, we've got great staff down at the facility to help direct customers when needed. The curbside recycling cart guide, now just differentiating slightly from what we just talked about at the Recycling Center Plus, this is just a good time to point this out. We do have these items listed on our website, which tends to be helpful, and we've got acceptable and unacceptable as well on both sides. Regardless of who your hauler is, this is going to be an acceptable list. And for a number of years, it was quite challenging because people would call in and they say, well, I have this hauler, or I have this hauler, and they say this, and this one says that. And to try to make things a little bit more uniform, a group from the Recycling Education Committee, which is actually a statewide group that meets, and my boss attends those meetings. And so it's nice to have that direct connection to this group, really decides on, okay, what's some standard language that we can use that's safe regardless of who your hauler is. So, I mean, this list was compiled with input from representatives from the waste haulers, from materials recovery facilities, or MRFs, which is where all these items get sorted out, as well as solid waste educators and administrators from across the state of Minnesota. On the flip side of these cart guides that we hand out, we have items that should not be going in your recycling cart. There's certainly other items beyond these, but I mean, these would be the usual suspects, so to speak. And with that, plastic bags and batteries are quite problematic. We talked about lithium ion earlier. And so with regard to single-use alkaline batteries, that's a common question. Those can just go in the trash. So single-use alkaline, your double A's can go right in the trash. Anything that's rechargeable, we want brought to Haz Waste. Plastic bags are problematic because they tangle sorting equipment at materials recovery facilities. Same thing goes for hoses, cords, wires. I'm going to flip just briefly to this slide. This is an image from a sorting line at Demcon Materials Recovery. So this is a MRF up in Shakopee, Minnesota. And every single day they have to send workers out onto their lines to tear off these bags and tanglers because they really gum up the works. And it's a huge waste of resources in terms of staff time. They have to shut down operations. And, there's a lot of folks who probably had the best of intentions by putting their plastic bags in their cart, but unknowingly are creating problems. So recyclables should always be loose. Garbage should always be bagged. And jumping back into here, there's other items as well. So electronics can't go in your curbside recycling cart, but they can be recycled at the Recycling Center Plus. Making special emphasis on the waste wizard that we have on our website. It's a really handy tool, one stop drop off instructions for over 500 different items in there. So whether you're looking to get rid of a couch or a computer or a washing machine, whatever that is, it'll tell you where you can take that material, when you can take it there, and whether or not a disposal fee applies. Since we were on the topic of materials recovery facilities, this is a good point to mention that Olmsted County is in the process of designing a MRF to be built right here in town, attached to the south side of the Olmsted Waste to Energy Facility. So in this rendering, it would be this portion of this drawing. So right now, I mean, this is the waste energy part of it. All of our recyclables are currently trucked up to these MRFs up in Shakopee, Inver Grove Heights, Minneapolis, St. Paul. And so if we can provide that local destination for recyclable materials, we really save a lot on the greenhouse gas emissions of the fossil fuels required to transport those all the way up to the Twin Cities. We will also be able to run garbage through this
Hey,
facility.
Anthony,
Yeah,
before you go into the next part, we did have a question in the chat here.
yeah.
Why can you not put shredded paper in the recycling?
Good question. Shredded paper, it's a problem with its size rather than its makeup. So we can recycle shredded paper at the Olmsted County Recycling Center Plus because we accept items source separated. So you can't see it in this picture because it's down on this end, but clean white shredded office paper is recyclable at our facility because we don't have to separate it out from the pop cans and the milk jugs and everything else. At materials recovery facilities, this is just such a limited sorting screen here. But if we look at this one, all of those items that are mixed together are going to get trucked up to the cities and they're going to get dumped onto what's called a tipping floor. And a front end loader is going to scoop them up and they're going to drop them into a big hopper at one end of the MRF. And they're going to then proceed to go through a number of sorting screens that are staffed by humans and, in some cases, robots, as well as just, big areas that can separate out three-dimensional objects from two-dimensional objects. And so
We
the shredded, sorry, go ahead.
have another question in the chat about the MRF here.
Okay.
Um,
So just let me just finish wrapping up on that shredded paper. Anything smaller than your fist is really too small to be sorted out effectively at a MRF. And we don't have that listed on our cart guide because it's, at a certain point, you can only put so much content on a cart guide because it starts to get confusing then. And so shredded paper, though, we specifically call that out because it just filters through these sorting screens and ends up mixing in with the other commodities. So long story short, throw your shredded paper in your garbage. If you have a reason to come down to the Recycling Center Plus, you feel free to bring that along with you. We don't want people making special trips. Let's say you live in Byron. We don't want you hopping in your car and burning the gas to go drop off, a grocery bag filled with shredded paper. I mean, that's not really helping in that sense. So if it makes sense, great. Bring that clean shredded paper to our facility. Otherwise, just throw it in the garbage. So great question.
Thank you for the MRF. The county board had mentioned that a community waste task force to inform the county's MRF plans was going to be organized this summer. Is there a plan to still convene a task force?
So I'd have to follow up with some of our managerial staff in the department on that. A couple years back, We did have a kind of a community recycling task force that was comprised of representatives from Olmsted County, as well as businesses and community members to talk about recycling. That wasn't specific to the MRF. So whether there is one specific to the MRF for a task force, I'd have to follow up with our department director or assistant director on that, or management at the waste energy facility, because I don't have latest information on that. So good question, and I'd be happy to, if the person who's asking that question wants to leave their contact information, I'd be more than happy to get the full answer on that. But for the timetable on this MRF, we're hoping about fall of 2025 is what I've spring to fall 2025 is when we think it would be open. So still in the design phase. A lot of the work is going to be, done for construction over the course of 2024. And yeah, hopefully the doors are open for operations not too long after that. Another great question. And any others while we're going?
Nothing else in the chat.
Okay. All right, great. And just to go back on that too, there's going to be a lot more communications as we're going along. I mean, we're still in early phases with the design plans. I'm personally looking forward to a lot of the building procedure, just because that social media content basically writes itself to be able to just take a picture of it and explain this type of the facility, or this part of the facility will be used to separate aluminum cans. This part is going to separate out plastic. So, and there's a lot of really cool technology that goes into being able to separate those items out. So we've talked, thinking back on that hierarchy, we've talked about waste reduction, reuse, recycling, composting. Now the yard waste compost site has been very busy over the last 6 weeks. And I mean, we're starting to kind of wind down just because a lot of leaves have been dropped off already, but this is going to be the drop-off site for yard waste, primarily leaves and grass clippings and non-woody yard waste. So potted plants are just fine. Decorative grasses are fine. We just want to make sure that nothing is going to be woody, and then remind folks to bring their plastic bags with them, because the plastic bags do not break down in the process. Last week, I was dropping off a mum, so our potted plant that we had in front of our house for the last couple months. And once I got there, I noticed there was this plastic green mesh netting that I presumably was in place to help the mum keep its shape. It was kind of a hassle to pull that thing out before I dropped off the whole plant, and then also making sure that the plastic that the mum was in, anything non-organic, we just ask that residents do their best to take that out, because that's going to unfortunately not break down and just create contaminants for the finished compost. What we're looking at here is our scarab machine or windrow turner from the front, this one from the back. Periodically turning the compost is essential for the decomposition process, in that it helps distribute moisture and oxygen throughout the pile, and it helps to expose as much organic material to those high temperatures we need for effective decomposition. I like to show this picture to illustrate how hot these piles get. I don't know if you can see this well on your screens, but I took this picture back in it was a February day, and the ambient air temperature was less than 9 degrees Fahrenheit. On the tip of this probe that was stuck into the top of the decomposing yard waste, we were at about 142 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that gives you a good example that there is a lot of heat generated from the microorganisms doing their job of breaking down this organic waste. And I like it specifically because I get a lot of questions in April about invasive jumping worms. And if you haven't heard about those, just do a quick Google search on them. They're kind of a frustrating nuisance, so to speak, in that they're detrimental to potted plants and gardens, and you really don't want them. And we have an open compost site, so we're not sifting through every bag of leaves that people are dropping off. But the prevailing research shows that when yard waste is exposed to um, yeah, or sorry, when their jumping worm cocoons are exposed to, I think, just over 100 degrees Fahrenheit for a period of 3 days, that's enough to kill them. And we are, easily surpassing that threshold with the temperature of our yard waste. If you go down to the site, you will see a sign that kind of says we've spotted them on the site. So in outer edges of the site in vegetation, knock on wood, we have yet to find any jumping worms in the finished compost. And that finished compost is available for pickup on the north end of the site. It's free for the taking. There's no charge for it. There are donation boxes available on site for those who feel inclined to support the site's operations. Moving right down that list again, we now come to the waste to energy tier on the hierarchy. So the Olmsted Waste Energy Facility initially opened in 1987 with a capacity of 200 tons of garbage per day. That was with 2 combustion units or 2 boilers. In 2010, a third boiler was added that effectively doubled the facility's capacity to 400 tons of garbage per day. We see about a 90% reduction by volume. So you can think for every 10 garbage trucks coming into the facility, we are sending about 1 roll-off container of ash out to the Kalmar Landfill. And I mean, that volume reduction piece in and of itself has been huge for our solid waste system. Without our waste energy facility, we would have filled up our currently permitted landfill 4 times over by the year 2021. With this facility in operation, we still have decades worth of space left. I got a few more slides that kind of show the Kalmar landfill, so I'll probably jump back to that topic in just a bit. And then, sorry, I should say that energy produced from this facility is also sent out to buildings on the Olmsted County District Energy System for heating, cooling, electrical use, or a combination of those 3. Excuse me. And then one final thing to remember on that, waste to energy is sometimes unfairly compared to other sources of energy like natural gas. The energy production isn't comparing apples to apples. The main benefit of waste to energy is effective management of our garbage, and the energy production is an added benefit. And so when somebody says, well, you compare this to a natural gas burner, well, they're cranking out way more um, electricity, but you know that's their only job. So this facility kind of has dual purposes. This image here is an update from actually a caricature drawn by one of the nuns from Assisi Heights, I think back in the early 90s. It is a it's an oversimplistic representation of what we're doing, but it does get down to the essence of utilizing that garbage as a resource or biomass fuel for the production of steam and electricity, remaining ash going out to the Kalmar landfill. And before trucks enter the facility, they will stop in at a scale house and be weighed before they are admitted into the facility. Garbage is charged a tipping fee in Olmsted County. So no property taxes are used to fund any operations in Olmsted County's integrated solid waste management system. Essentially, it's a user pays system. So again, kind of like at the recycling center plus, the more you throw away, the more you pay. What we're looking at here would be how the trucks enter the tipping floor. They back up and dump their load into the pit, into the the facility's pit, which does have a capacity of upwards of 2,000 tons of garbage. So since the facility has a capacity of 400 tons of garbage per day processing, they can clear through a full pit in less than a week. And that garbage pile can really start to add up because periodically they do have to shut down the boilers for routine maintenance, and that garbage will start to pile up. In this picture here, you get the bird's eye view from the operator's chair in the control room as they maneuver the crane and grapple to pick up loads of garbage and drop into one of 3 hoppers that then gravity feed the garbage into combustion chambers. Temperatures inside the combustion chambers can reach in excess of 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's a very effective burn. Sometimes people will say, well, what's the difference between what you guys are doing and what we're doing? Or, excuse me, by what you're doing at the facility versus, if I wanted to burn my garbage in a backyard burn. And the answer is a lot. Waste energy is, some of the most regulated technology in terms of energy production. We have to comply with very strict pollution control limits set forth by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Here you can see that the control room is monitored 24/7, so the facility is always operating. They do run on 12-hour shifts, and so that helps them catch up, because during operating hours they might take in over 500 tons of garbage, so that pit volume is going to slowly build and build through the course of the week, and it really helps to catch up on weekends and at nights to draw down on that pile. I'm going to jump back to air emissions and pollution control equipment in just a couple slides, but I like to point this out. Every 5 years we do a waste composition study, and this is extremely valuable information because we get to see changes in the waste stream and how the garbage ton, a generic garbage ton, is evolving over time. And something we're seeing is more organic waste in the waste stream. This company is actually from Winona, Minnesota, and super interesting group to talk to. I took this picture. This was back in 2019, so we do have another waste sort coming up next year in 2024. Yeah, super interesting stories that they had, because they do this not just in Minnesota, but they travel around the country to provide these waste sorts. And as you can imagine, there's not a whole lot of companies out there, a lot of people out there willing to sift through trash and organize it and audit it, because they're touching everything from bags of dog poop, dirty diapers, rotten food, you name it, they categorize it. So it's yeah, definitely a needed job. I remember I asked the guy in the front left with the orange vest, I just said, well, what does it take to do a job like this? And he just kind of pauses for a bit and says, well, you got to have a strong stomach. And I thought that was a very good answer, because out on this tipping floor, it's not pleasant. I mean, if you're in street clothes, you don't want to be in those same street clothes later in that day. Now, jumping back to emissions, I'm not going to go super deep into it, but I do like to show these comparisons. These blue columns that you're going to see represent permit limits, and the orange columns relative to the blue columns are, actual test results. So, and you may be wondering, why is unit 3 so much lower than unit 1 and 2? Well, units 1 and 2 were grandfathered in because they came online in 1987. So when unit 3 was proposed to come online in 2010, it was subject. I mean, they really made the regulations even more strict at that point. But I mean, we still utilize each of the 3 combustion units without really any big problems. I mean, if we do have problems in the process, it's usually because we're getting items that we don't want in the garbage, like propane tanks, or bulky items that we just can't fit through the hoppers. Going back to the emissions here, this is testing for hydrogen chloride, nowhere near the permit limit. Sulfur dioxide, again, nowhere near the permit limits. Nitrogen oxide, a little bit closer to the permit limit on unit 3. And this is a good example on why we don't want yard waste, specifically grass clippings, in the garbage, because grass clippings are high in nitrogen. And when they go through that combustion process, they create NOx. And then getting into these heavy metals like mercury, absolutely nowhere near the permit limits. Lead and cadmium, nowhere near the permit limits. And that's a combination of multiple things. We have that robust air pollution control system in place that consists of an acid gas scrubber, or a quench reactor, where we pump in a mixture of lime and water to create a lime slurry that helps to neutralize acid gases. We pump in a mixture called, or a material called powdered activated carbon, which effectively captures and encapsulates heavy metals in the flue gas. All of that then passes through a series of large fabric filters. Um, and as you can see, it creates a much cleaner, um, a much cleaner product coming out of the stack than what's happening inside of it. Another thing that helps our ability to keep emissions down is the fact that we have this integrated system. So the fact that we have a recycling center plus and yard waste, excuse me, recycling center plus hazardous waste facility and yard waste compost site just 100 yards away provides a convenient outlet, because we don't want cell phones going in the garbage, because cell phones have a lot of those materials that we don't want going through the combustion process. Same things with like CFL light bulbs that have mercury in them. We bring those to the hazardous waste facility, so we don't have to take them. So to a certain, I mean, again, we have this our own pollution control equipment, but we are reliant on the community to also take some ownership over their waste and make sure that they are handling that, in its proper place. And then finally, too, these low emissions relative to permit limits are also a result of just a changing waste stream. So there's just fewer and fewer products with hazardous materials in them. A good example of that would be a thermometer. So instead of having metallic mercury in it, it's digital, or a thermostat. Instead of having metallic mercury, it's digital. So there's a variety of factors going in there to help us stay beneath permit limits. Going down, this is our kind of the last piece of the presentation as we get into discussing the Kalmar Landfill. Earlier, I had talked about that we really only have one good spot to site a landfill, and that's really out in kind of the western side of Olmsted County, out in Kalmar Township. This little yellow square represents basically the footprint of the landfill. And all of this other area in the county where you see these oranges and pinks and reds represents areas that are just not suitable for a landfill due to, potential contaminants in the groundwater. We have a very thick natural clay base layer to provide the foundation of our engineered landfill out at Kalmar. And so that's where you see this green. So lots of clay, which is fairly impermeable compared to other types of materials that you'd find in bedrock. The main material that we're sending out to the Kalmar landfill is going to be ash from the waste energy facility. So before we mentioned that it's about a 90% reduction by volume. So again, every 10th garbage truck in terms of volume is going out to the Kalmar landfill in ash. And that's what this bulldozer is doing. If you're wondering why there's kind of two tones of color, the fresh ash from the facility has a slightly higher moisture content. And so that'll dry as time goes on, but it really helps to keep that material from blowing around as well. And they do have daily cover that they can put on, the open face of cells that they're working on, or other forms of cover that they can apply if they're getting to that window of when they need to do that. I jumped ahead just to show, when I took this picture, this is what this dozer was doing, was applying a tarp to a lot of this junk in the municipal solid waste or garbage cell. I'm going to jump back into the ash cell. On the western side of the landfill is where we would have our ash cells located. This is facing to the north. So these northern cells are closed at the moment. This photo was taken a couple years back as they were constructing cell 6A. You can see them putting in the big plastic liners underneath them. This is the open face in there. This, brown spot here, that's iron that they pull out of the ash before they bury it. And last October, we finished an ash utilization product. So more common in Scandinavian countries, they utilize the ash as a substitute for aggregate in the production of roads, or in the construction of roads, I should say. And this would be a great use of keeping our waste down that we send into the landfill, and finding another useful purpose for it. So each mile of 2-lane highway constructed with OWEF ash would reduce the amount landfilled by 5%. So that could be a huge savings on what we have to bury in our engineered landfill. This is just another picture. So this was earlier in the process, and here they're putting on the finishing layer. And so yeah, we're kind of in the watching and waiting phase to make sure that the road holds up, that it's not cracking, and so stay tuned for more information on that. The second cell that probably gets the second most amount of activity would be the MSW cell, or just garbage cell. When they're doing outages at the Olmsted Waste Energy Facility, they do bypass and send the waste out here, and they do eventually backhaul that waste back to the waste energy facility. But again, it's important to have that. There is also a construction demolition cell. In terms of a cross section, in underneath the cells, I should say, the ash cell was essentially built to hazardous waste specifications. So underneath these cross sections and on top of the naturally occurring clay, we've got 3 feet of compacted clay, a plastic liner, another 2.5 feet of compacted clay, another plastic liner. Similar technology over in the garbage cell, 1 plastic liner. Both facilities have what's called leachate collection. Leachate is just rainwater that falls onto the cells out at the landfill. And this jar on the left is leachate from the ash cell that we've collected. And this jar on the right is what it looks like when rainwater or leachate is pumped out underneath the just typical garbage cell. Both cases, it's pumped out and brought to the water reclamation plant here in Rochester for treatment. So just a much more uniform liquid from the ash cell than the garbage cell. Finally, getting to this last photo here, this is also a plug that, recycling and waste energy coexist quite well together. People who are anti-waste energy might say that, if you run a waste energy facility, you don't have an incentive to, get the recyclables out of your stream or your waste stream because, you charge a tipping fee. Well, we don't want recyclables in our pit. Most of them, glass bottles, aluminum cans, tin cans, soup cans, that adds no BTU value to our fuel, and it just really creates problems. Here, we can pull out any ferrous metals after it has gone through the combustion process, and that's what you see behind this excavator with a giant magnet on the front end of its bucket. And we will sift through the ash, and we pull out thousands of tons of recyclable material that would have otherwise been buried if we did not have this type of system in place. So just a plug for that. And then finally, I'm going to do a shameless request, a shameless plug for Olmsted County's Environmental Resources Facebook page. I'm still sharing, aren't I, Lauren?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. I'm seeing some nods. I tell you what, today is America Recycles Day. And so if you can, go out to our Facebook page, Olmsted County Environmental Resources, and go ahead, drop a like, comment, or a share of our curbside recycling cart guide, because that's, again, going to be helpful whether you have, this, that, or one of the other Class A haulers. It doesn't really matter. It's going to be helpful information. So that was a lot of information that we covered there in the last 45 minutes. So I hope it was somewhat enjoyable on the lunch hour here for folks. But yeah, and happy to stick around for any questions that people might have about this content. Oh, and one other plug too. In mid-April, so as part of EarthFest, we usually have an open house event. So if you are interested in any of this, or you want to see the waste energy facility in person, we certainly invite you to come through the facility, come take a tour. And if you have a group that would be interested, we can accommodate tours anytime throughout the year as well. So, that's been part of our system. We've had many thousands of people tour through our facilities since, they've been open, since the waste energy opened in 1987, tens of thousands of people, in almost 4 decades. of time. And so being transparent with what we're doing has always been key to our operations. So with that, yeah, I'll open up for any questions.
Thank you so much. We do have one question in the chat that we didn't get to yet, so maybe I'll start with that and give others a chance to think of any questions, or if you're more comfortable putting it in the chat, feel free to do that as well, and I can ask them here for Anthony. This one was, I've heard from lots of different community members about interest in curbside organic pickup. Is this something the county is working towards?
Yeah, good question. And it's one that we continue to see, you know, off and on, primarily from folks who move to the community. And so if you come from, maybe the metro area or another state, that's one of the first questions that we get. We don't currently have any plans from a county standpoint because reminder that the county does not oversee any of the curbside collection. That's all done through private haulers with Class A license. There is a process for any business that would be interested in, starting that type of a business for curbside organics, but the county is not in the business of that commercial hauling right now. So there's no interest from that at this point. There is some pretty cool possibilities with anaerobic digestion coming up, in the next year or so. There's over in Winona County, I believe they've been in communications with, I think it's a Danish company, about creating an anaerobic digester that would use manure from a large dairy operation uh, as 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 feedstock for the anaerobic digester. If that facility were to get up and running, that would present a pretty interesting outlet for food waste that could potentially be mixed. And so this is way down the road, so I mean, take this with a grain of salt, but the potential lies to be able to separate out, let's say you put in your apple cores and banana peels and coffee grounds in a certain type of bag, and be able to pull that out of the garbage before it goes in the waste energy facility. That is an idea. I'm not saying that will happen, but it's an idea that's been kicked around. Certainly, curbside collection has been kicked around as well from private businesses in the community who've asked about it. It's just nothing has come to fruition with that just yet. So that's kind of I guess, a stay tuned.
Any other questions from any participants today?
And I'll hang out here for a few minutes longer, but I certainly appreciate everyone willing to take time out of their lunch hour. So.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for joining us for our November series here. We will follow up. The webinar recording will be posted on the DMC's YouTube page, and we will share the presentation slides to the Dropbox format as well. I will stop recording here, and we'll just hang out for a little bit longer if there are any other questions. Thank you.
And Lauren, I do see that there is in addition to that, organics. They also added, speaking of haulers, when is the current contract with private haulers going to be renewed? So good question. This was actually just asked, I think, in the Post Bulletin Answer Man a few weeks back. They were specifically asking, why does Rochester have so many waste haulers? Because in other communities, the cities or municipalities will contract with one specific, and they cite reasons like a desire to have fewer trucks going up and down the roads. And really, it comes down to, what does the community want? Uh, we have a number of Class A license available in our community because that's what were receiving input from the community, that they wanted competition. So there's kind of two camps on that. One group would rather see one hauler for ease of logistics, one hauler collecting, less wear and tear on roads. And then you got another camp that's interested in having that competitive landscape to be able to switch haulers if they so choose. So that is, from my standpoint with the county, it's almost like, I'm kind of passing the buck by saying that, but it is, that's left up to each individual city. Because over in Eota, I believe they do contract with just one waste hauler. I think in Byron it's just two. So the residents of Rochester certainly have that voice that they can lobby with their city council members should they be inclined. But yeah, that's sort of left up to I guess the constituents of each individual community. Good questions though.
All right. Thank you again. I am going to stop the recording now, and then we'll just hang out for a little bit if there are any other questions from folks. Thank you, everyone.